Welcome back to JP's Budget Collecting and our weekly look back at the hot comics from 6 months ago. This week we're looking back at the hot comics from June 4th, 2021, and I'm recording this on December 2nd, 2021. I give you these dates so you know when this information is most relevant because the comic market is always moving and changing. Some kind of announcement might move some of these books around here in the next week or whatever. So, as always, we're also looking back at the Comic Tom Key Collector Hottest Trending Comics of the Week and the CBSI Hot Top 10. Those are the two lists I look at. I know there's a lot of other places that are now making lists. I feel like in the last year or so, there's been several places that have started doing their hot lists as well. These are the two I focus on. Between them, we usually come up between 15 and 20 books because they each put out a list of 10. So we look at these books to try to understand what made them hot back then, what factors have affected them since, have they maintained, have they dropped back, so that we all make better decisions about what books we chase in the moment and which books we're patient on, that hopefully we can get a little better deal, and so we all do a little better job in our collecting. So with that, let's dig into this week's list and see how these books did. First up, we have Invincible #1. This is obviously the first appearance of Invincible, of Omni-Man. This was actually after the show had been out for a while. This book hit all-time highs way back in April for 9.8, around $3,600 when the show dropped. By June, 9.8s were hitting all-time highs of $6,150 and $7,000, so it had jumped way up on a 9.8. Partially because of announcements of another season. But anyway, since then it's dropped back down to $3,000 to $4,000 for 9.8. Raw copies will cost you $700 to $1,200, which is kind of where it jumped to. It's kind of held the prices from when the show dropped. Hasn't held the prices that it got to later. So still doing really good. Still way up from where it was this time last year. But overall, this book is down, and it'll all be back compared to what it was when it was hitting those all-time highs in June. Next, we have Red Thorn #1. This was optioned by the BBC. Raw copies of this were going for $30 to $40 with this announcement that it had been optioned. Now they're a $1 to $5 book. So this turned into a bit of a dumpster fire. Nobody... like all auction news, nothing's happened with it anytime soon after it was initially optioned. B, this is also BBC and not necessarily even going to be in America where it's going to be shown, so I wasn't sure why it jumped as high as it did. 30 to 40 is pretty high for an auction news book, but this one definitely turned out to not be a good investment. Next, we have Action Comics #894. This is a great cover of Death. This is not actually her first appearance in continuity or her first appearance overall. But this book jumped all the way up to $50 around news around the Sandman show that's coming out. I believe this may have been casting. It's not in the notes. This may have been her casting. I don't know if that's the case or not. But anyway, now it's a $35 to $70 book. 9.8, it costs you $150 to $250. So this has actually been pretty steady. You have been able to find a few deals. If you're patient, it'll make it and I'll be back. But great cover, great character. Not a huge key in terms of just more of her first cover in continuity, I guess. But so yeah. Next, we have Super Crooks #1. This is another Millar project that potentially could be coming to Netflix. That's why this hit the list. $20 back then. 9.8 was going for $220. Now it's a $1 to $20 book for a raw copy. 9.8s now are down to around $100. So this one definitely turned into a bit of a trap. We'll see how many of these Millar projects actually get made. Jupiter's Legacy didn't do great. They only got one season out of it, but they're still talking about doing a bunch of Millar stuff. So we'll see what comes of all these different Millar comics that he's trying to sell to Netflix. Next, we have Basilisk #1. This is our one cover of the week. This is a Jonas Scharf 1 per store Virgin variant. Back then, raw copies of this 1 per store were going for $40 plus. Now it's a $30 to $40 book, but there's only been 4 sales. So this one is definitely down, a bit of an I'll be back. I know there was some buzz around the series when it first came out, but I haven't heard anybody talk about it really since then. So I don't know if it didn't sustain or if it wasn't as good as people hoped. But it definitely doesn't seem to have as much conversation around it as it used to. Next, we have X-Men #53. This is the first appearance of Onslaught. This is actually basically the same rise we talked about last week. This is on opposite lists, though. Raw copies were all the way up to 25 to 30. 9.8 actually hit 400, which is actually up from last week's 9.8 sale. Raw copies now are 5 to 20, 9.8s are down to 100 to 150. So this has definitely turned into a trap. This hit the list because people thought Onslaught might be getting added to the Hickman X-Men run. I don't believe that ever happened. Maybe somebody can correct me. I don't remember actually hearing anybody talk about it, Onslaught actually appearing. Maybe it's still going to. I don't know. Next, we have Nice House on the Lake, #1. The Werther Deladera 125. This series had a bunch of buzz, but several of the covers were going for above cover or above ratio when it came out. But this 1 in 25 was actually just going for $30, even though they put it on the hot list, which is not actually very hot for a 1 in 25. Generally, you can't hardly get into a 1 in 25 for less than 25 initially. So yeah, now it's 25 to 40. 9.8 will cost you 80 to 120. So this one's been steady, a bit of an I'll be back, but it's really setting ratio to slightly above, which is not that unusual at all for 1 in 25. A little surprised it went on the list at all, I'll be honest, back then. Next we have Blackjack Demon, #1. This is kind of a hot indie of the moment that was super low print, pretty hard to find. It was going for $15 to $20 out the gate at release. Now it's a $5 to $10 book, so still a little bit of buzz. It's still going for above cover, but definitely an I'll be back on this one. Our next comic buzz book is Future State Wonder Woman #1, the first full appearance of Yara Flor, the new Wonder Girl / future Wonder Woman. Raw copies were going for $25 plus back then. Now raw copies will cost you $5 to $20. 9.8 only cost you $65 to $100. So this one's definitely down, definitely a bit of an I'll be back so far. Potentially maybe good value here long term, but generally some of these Wonder Girls aren't really, Cassie Sandmark doesn't go for a lot. Donna's book, when you think about what else it is, and how long ago it was being a Silver Age book, doesn't go for that much compared to a lot of Silver Age keys. So yeah, we'll see if Yara Flor actually gets some value gains back, or if it just becomes a small key. Next, we have Peter Parker, the Spectacular Spider-Man #1. This is the first appearance of Teresa Parker, Peter's long-lost sister. Basically, she had appeared back then, and she kind of got reintroduced in ASM as part of the Chameleon Conspiracy over the summer. Raw copies jumped all the way up to $45 for this book, which seems super high. Now raw copies will cost you $5 to $10. 9.8 will only cost you $50 to $60. So this one definitely turned into a dumpster fire. A lot of the asking prices on this one's still a lot higher, but not selling for that for sure. Next we have Earth 2 #1. This is the reintroduction of the Golden Age Green Lantern Alan Scott. He was kind of introduced on Earth 2. They gave him kind of a different backstory, a different way of getting the ring, all that kind of stuff. And basically, this hit the list because we got news that this is going to be one of the characters that is featured in the Green Lantern show. It's kind of an anthology, so there's going to be different stories with different lanterns, just the way it appears. And we had casting news there. Raw copies were going for $5 to $20 back then. Now they're $5 to $10. So definitely a bit of an I'll be back. Not a lot of momentum here. I'm not sure what the timing is on this Green Lantern show. I feel like we've been hearing about it for a long time. I know there's a lot of special effects work they're going to have to do, but I'm not sure we're even that close to it yet. So we'll see. Next, we have Amazing Spider-Man 565. This is the first appearance of Anna Kravinoff, the daughter of Kraven the Hunter. This is kind of weird. They weren't really sure why it hit the list, but there was a huge jump in 9.8 values. They were going for $600 to $1,000. There was just a bunch of 9.8s not a bunch, but a couple of 9.8s that sold for really high values, even though the raw copies were still only going for around 25, and 9.6 was only going for around 150. Seemed kind of strange that the 9.8s jumped so high. Now, raw copies are still $10 to $30, kind of in that same range, which is obviously most of the sales on this book. 9.8s are back down all the way down to like $300. So not sure what caused the 9.8 to jump back then, but that definitely turned into a monster trap if you went after a 9.8 at those values. The raw copies still sitting in the same range. So again, not sure what was going on there, but definitely caused it. It definitely spiked and was a book that was worth being patient on. Next, we have Web of Spider-Man number 32. This is part 4 of Kraven's Last Hunt. This hit the list because there were rumors that Aaron Taylor Johnson is going to be taking the role of Kraven, and we're going to get a Kraven solo movie from Sony. Raw copies were going for 10, but 9.8 jumped all the way up to 350 on this book. Now, raw copies are actually up 10 to 40. 9.8 are actually kind of up 350 to 500. Not sure why this particular issue, other than the cover. I can't imagine if they do a Kraven movie, they're going to start with Kraven's Last Hunt. That's kind of the end of the story. So, but interesting that these books jump, because the next book on our list is Amazing Spider-Man number 294, part 5 of Kraven's Last Hunt. Also another famous cover. Back then, raw copies of this were going for 40, while 9.8s were up to 325. This one's actually done the opposite. It's backed up a little bit. Raws now are 10 to 30. 9.8s will cost you 275 to 350. So this has become a bit of an I'll be back. Again, interesting why these two particular Kraven books hit the list. I really doubt we get a Kraven's Last Hunt anytime soon. If we get a Kraven movie, I know they've talked about it a bunch over the years, but we'll see. Next, we have Amazing Spider-Man number 41, first appearance of Rhino. Basically, spec that we're getting Sinister Six and No Way Home, and that Rhino might be one of them. Caused this book to jump. 8.0s hit 1,000. 9.2 hit an all-time high of $3,000. Now, raw copies are going for 400 to 600, and then kind of a mid-grade. 8.0s are 1,500 to 2,000. There's been no recent sales of a 9.2, but this one is definitely up overall. Like a lot of Silver Age Spider-Man stuff, this book has just continued to climb this year in general, as well with any kind of news or rumors. They've all been creeping up for sure. Next, we have Thor number 2. This is what some people claim is the first full appearance of Jane Foster as Thor. Not really identified as that by CGC. She's on the cover of one. She appears on a whole page. They call her Thor. Kind of, you get a little bit of that also in God of Thunder number 25. But some people are claiming this is it. It doesn't seem to be the book necessarily people were chasing. But back then, raw copies jumped up to $30 to $60. 9.8s were hitting $135. Now raw copies are down to $20 to $30. You can get a deal. Interestingly enough, 9.8s had went up. They were going steadily $2 to $250. And they still, by now, they're still selling $2 to $250 even in the last week or so. But the last 3 auctions have only went for around $100. And they've been scattered in amongst the buy it now sales. So there's a little bit of a split there. Auctions tend to be going for cheaper right now. So if you see an auction, that might be the way to go if you need this book. Overall, we'll call it, because most of the sales are those raw copies, we'll call it down, and I'll be back. Next, we have Black Panther number 1, the first from 1998, the first appearance of the Dora Milaje, also the first appearance of Okoye. And basically, this hit the list because in addition to rumors of a Wakanda show, there were rumors that Okoye might be getting her own show. Raw copies were going for $45 back then. 9.8 hit $475. Now raw copies are going for $20 to $60. 9.8, interestingly enough, most recent 2 sales, 300 and 800. Interesting range on that. Not a lot of 9.8s available for this book, which may have driven that higher sale. But overall, vast majority of these are raw copy sales. They've been pretty steady, and a bit of an I'll be back. Last book of the week is Black Panther number 22. First appearance of Killmonger as Black Panther. Back then, raw copies hit $50 plus. Now they're going 40 to 60, so another book that's been pretty steady. A lot of people seem to want this. I'm not sure there's actually any information that's backing up that they're going to bring Michael B. Jordan back to play Black Panther. If anything, it seems to be leaning towards Shuri or M'Baka as being the Black Panther going forward. We'll see. I kind of doubt this is the spec, but people are definitely still buying it for around those same prices. So that is this week's list. I want to thank you guys for watching, and we will catch you next time.